my lovelies, and welcome to Where the Road Rises with me, your host, Eileen Curlin-Walsh. Our guest today is Dr. Paul Merrick, a renowned physician and board-certified urologist. He is chairman of the board and CEO of DuPage Medical Group. Under Paul's leadership, DuPage Medical Group has grown to be the largest independent, multi-specialty physician organization in Illinois. Dr. Merrick also helped establish the DuPage Medical Group Charitable Foundation, which supports and funds over 30 local nonprofits, providing food, housing, healthcare, and wellness services to those in need. I met Dr. Merrick in June of this year at the ceremonial opening of DuPage Medical Group facility in Oak Lawn. Like a modern-day Oliver Sacks, Dr. Merrick spoke of deep physician-driven engagement with patients for vastly improved outcomes. I was so moved by his advocacy for mercy, love, and compassion in the physician-patient relationship and his desire to help the indigent that I wanted you to meet him. So welcome, Dr. Merrick.
Eileen, it's a privilege. Your passion and enthusiasm is very infectious.
Well, I saw the same in you, Doctor. So why don't you start by telling us your story? How did you grow up? Was your family in medicine? Did you have a role model? Tell us about your path to becoming a doctor.
Well, I grew up nearby the Oak Lawn facility, as I shared, at 107th Place in Western in the Beverly Morgan Park area. My father was an OB-GYN physician who moved from Michigan. He grew up in a single parent family home back before that was common, and worked his way through school and settled on the south side of Chicago. And so he was my first mentor, I would say. My mother is a pharmacist by training, and I sort of inadvertently got into medicine. My father was a very hardworking man, and as a young man, I was more determined to have a little bit more maybe fun or relaxation. So I went to University of Illinois with the intent to be a lawyer, actually. As circumstances would have it, in my first year down there, I received my first bad mark in a pre-law class. And then this summer I worked in an emergency room up at St. Joseph's Hospital in Chicago on Lakeshore Drive. And that experience of working with people and helping people in the emergency room just set my course for my life. Once you get into the care business, you find out if that's your calling or not. And indeed, that was my calling.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have a son right now, my 19-year-old, who is working in emergency care at Christ Advocate, and he had wanted to do nursing, and he now wants to become a doctor. So a similar path. No lawyer for him either. So tell me about the DuPage Medical Group and your role there, Paul. Tell me about how you became involved and how you became involved in the leadership.
And so I went to school to be a urologist and help people with cancer and be a surgeon. I love surgery, love the patient care aspect of my life, my career. And my second mentor was Daryl Stremler, our founding CEO, who in 2005, unfortunately, he passed away of colon cancer at the very young age of 45 years old. And after that event, our leadership was sort of in flux, I would say. And so my partners on the board asked me to consider being the lead physician in 2008. And it took a lot of thoughtful reflection, prayer, and ultimately came to the conclusion that I needed to answer that request. And I agreed to serve for 2 years in the leadership role. And as circumstances have evolved, I still continue as the lead physician role and the chairman of the board.
And when did you realize that you had, so this was almost like a second calling. So the first was to medicine, the second was to lead. And did you find you had a gift for that? Did you know that before you took on the leadership role?
Absolutely not. And that's why I think I agreed to serve for a defined period of time. But as things evolved, I found that I had thoughts and opinions that I was passionate about and was important. And first and foremost, I wanted to help my partners. Being a physician, other than the training and the time spent and the stress and all the other factors in healthcare that make it so complicated to focus on your true intent of serving people and the patients before you, I wanted to create an environment where we ran interference for our physicians such that they could focus more intently on what they were really called to do and why they went into medicine to begin with. And so that's a journey that takes quite some time. And so as we started solving little problems, there were more and more challenges that needed to be addressed. And so unfinished business, I would say, is what kept me in the role so long. But I am encouraged by some of the progress that we've made. And I've grown to have more and more significant opinions about how healthcare could look and evolve. And I'm happy that we were able to recruit an elite group of passionate physicians to sort of carry on this journey together.
Doctor, as I had indicated in the preamble, it's that passion you speak of, and it was indeed the compassion you talked about at the grand opening that really struck me and truly put me in mind of Dr. Oliver Saxon. He has always been one of my heroes. I think often that what he did for medicine and the medical narrative, we can do in the legal profession too, because just as surely there's often an unfortunate gap between the lawyer and the client, and it can lead to misunderstanding and just outcomes, worse outcomes than we could hope for. And Dr. Oliver Sacks, close to his death, had written an essay called The Sabbath, and I keep it by my desk for inspiration. I love that essay so much, and I wanted to read for you something that he said. And he actually, it was his work with these patients that led to that film, The Awakenings, that with Robert De Niro. My own recovery began when I found meaningful work in chronic care in a hospital in the Bronx. I was fascinated by my patients there, cared for them deeply, and felt something of a mission to tell their stories of situations virtually unknown, certainly to the public and to my fellow colleagues. So, because you made me think of Dr. Oliver Sacks, and you talked about compassion, I'd love you to talk a little bit about your philosophy of care and how that distinguishes you, Doctor.
I love the way that you started that quote from the essay, my own recovery. I think that's a very interesting choice of words in that, we live in a very goal-oriented world. We take the test, we can get through school, we get the residency we want, and we get the job we want. And we, with all those sort of pressures, we sometimes get distracted from the core mission, the core principle of why we went to do this to begin with, which is, quite frankly, just to help people. And I think that our goal, and I'm taking words that are not my own anymore, but our goal at our group, DuPage Medical Group, is really to help people, help humans flourish and allow people to define for themselves what that means. And I think in this world where healthcare has become very data-driven. I used to use the language check the box activity to prove that certain tasks are being. What we've lost a little bit is the connectedness between two humans trying to help each other through a challenge, or conversely just enjoy and enhance their wellness versus navigate them through a care delivery challenge. And so I think the way our system has historically been set up, it's very reactive. You wait for somebody to get sick, have a heart attack, or have some sort of health challenge, then we react to that. And so I think increasingly our mind is, we still need to be really good at that because regardless of our efforts, there will be disease and illness and trauma and issues like that. But also being proactive and helping people be well in times between those events.
Oh, I love that. Helping humans flourish. How are we doing? How are we doing as a society? How are we doing with our medical care? Are we getting better, doctor? Would you give us a 10? Would you give us a 5? Something in between?
Yeah, between, I think. The healthcare system is certainly imperfect, and yet, and lots of people, sometimes politicians will want to quote statistics of life expectancy or birth rate, death issues, and total cost of care. And you can make the case to say we're doing poorly or well either way. But I believe that we have a lot of really well-intended people trying to do the right thing, trying to help people. And yet it's not perfect. And some of it is the reimbursement system. And some of it is that it's a very sort of hospital-centric approach versus patient-centric approach. And I believe that the challenges of the pandemic last year have in some ways highlighted and magnified some of the brokenness in the system. So I reject the notion of absorbing that we're bad at healthcare. I think it's imperfectly delivered. It's delivered in a reactive way versus a proactive way. And from a patient connectedness, it's too sort of regimented and less personalized than it could and should be. And so it is our goal to address those things. And so I would say that depending on where you are, geographically may determine if you're at a 5 or a 7 in terms of the scale that you asked. But our aspirational goal at DuPage Medical Group is to continue to recruit talented and passionate physicians and other clinicians to provide resources in a very differentiated way. And there is some objective data that in our county where we started, we've done some nice things, but we want to share those things more broadly, and certainly in the south side of Chicago, the northwest suburbs, and we now have agreed to partner with the largest independent group in Indiana, and I believe there is a zeal and appetite and eagerness by clinicians to do the right thing, to help people in a different way. And it's complicated to get there. It's not an inevitability that we can break through all those historic challenges, but it's a task worth striving for sure.
And it's certainly, the pandemic may have shown gaps, doctor, but I think we also have to admit that it showed some heroism. It showed the extent, it showed the depth, the dedication of our doctors and healthcare workers. And I think something I thought was very interesting about the entire set of medical care was that everyone was appreciated, not just the top surgeons or the top doctors, the nurses, the fact that everyone who put on a uniform and went into a hospital and masked up and helped the dying, helped people to live, tried to hold their phone up for family members who couldn't get to visit. I think as a whole, I was really encouraged by who we are as humans and how we reacted to each other, the medical profession, and how the medical profession reacted to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of how we are better than we were 30 years ago. So when I was training, in the early 90s. To your point, the surgeon was the captain of the ship, and he or she was in charge in the room, and people sometimes even feared that person, and there wasn't a team-based approach and a respect for everybody's role and responsibility. I feel like we have made progress in that, and it is exciting when people are celebrated for their role, because every role matters. The physician, their job is to help create that team-based environment and have everybody work together.
Yeah. Tell us about the Charitable Foundation and the work DuPage Medical Group has done with the various local nonprofits.
So when I was asked to serve as the leadership role, the president was the title at the time. That was the first two things that I wanted to work on. One was access. So as recently as 2008, our physicians would show up and they'd leave at 5 o'clock. And if there was a problem after that, people were stuck going to the hospital. So we created a much more holistic access approach. And then in honor of our founding CEO, Daryl Stremler, who taught me many things, but I wanted to create a legacy of giving and a legacy of caring for those who can't quite care for themselves. And so I'm super proud of the fact that we raise and distribute a little over $500,000 a year to our communities. We have a charitable board that listens to other nonprofits, mostly around health, wellness, nutrition, housing, and because that does directly contribute to people flourishing. And so if we can help people who are under-resourced on the front end, that helps them live well and have less healthcare concerns.
Yeah. So what, on a deep philosophical level, what has your community outreach, your work with your patients, your work with the indigent, lifting up the struggling, trying to get us well, what has that taught you about the human condition? So we talked about the response to the pandemic. We are doing better, we believe, than we were 30 years ago. We hear a lot of criticism of who we are and what we're doing in the world. So what's your take on how we're doing, Doctor?
I had a friend, pastor, who used to always use the language, not perfectly, but increasingly. And some things are, I think we are, as humans, making progress. However, we are in need of faith and love. And I think that the world is very challenging and distracting, and nobody gets through this life without some burdens and challenges. And so we're better off leaning into our faith and leaning into each other and serving each other to the best of our ability, because that's really the definition of a life well lived.
Oh, I love that. So of the life that you've lived well to this date, what has been your greatest achievement and what do you see for your future?
I have never been asked that question before. And I just, well, I have two boys who are both smarter, more talented, kinder spirits than their papa was. And so I'm super proud of, and my wife deserves the vast majority of the credit for who they've become. But I, on a professional note, I am eagerly anticipating what DuPage Medical Group evolves to become, and can we meet our aspirational goals of helping clinicians. And I used to sort of think mostly in the terms of physicians, but to your point earlier, the clinical people include everybody, medical assistants and nurses and pharmacists and physicians assistants, and how do we engage what is a dedicated group of people and empower them to create different and better results. And so in our quest to do that, I'll share with you a teaser of an announcement. So we're going to change our name in September because many of the patients we serve are not in DuPage County. And so we want communities more broadly to be aware that we are not just people from DuPage who are helping other people, but we are embedded and entrenched in the communities that we serve, and we want to be a partner in their health and wellness.
And isn't that funny, Paul? Because I have had that thought that DuPage Medical Group sounds cold, whereas the hospitals that come from the religious traditions where we have Christ and mercy, these are wonderful words to bathe the medical care in. So I hope some of that faith and aspiration makes its way into your new medical name.
Me too.
Right. All right. Well, let's see. How about if we wrap up, Doctor, with maybe some closing thoughts? Do you have a favorite quote, poem, prayer that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah, I just, speaking as somebody who stands for justice, one of my favorite verses is Micah 6:8, which is seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. And justice, I think one of the best definitions is people who are fortunate and blessed or in a position of authority, use that blessing or authority to serve those who are not quite so blessed.
Oh, I can't think of a better way to end our interview than that. And you give me and all of us faith that we are going in the right direction with humanity and with our medical care. Doctor, so thank you for your insight. Thank you, viewers, for watching. If you want to know more about the DuPage Medical Group, as they're currently named, they do have all the information about their care, their doctors, their foundation at DuPageMedicalGroup.com. Or, as always, you can contact me at Curlin Walsh Law. Thanks again, viewers, for watching, and I will see you next time on Where the Road Rises. Goodbye.